Have you ever wondered why the medieval period is often referred to as the Dark Ages? This moniker conjures images of a time shrouded in ignorance, superstition, and the shadow of the Roman Empire's fall. Yet the term Dark Ages is largely a fallacy, a misnomer born from a skewed perspective of the past. Let's uncover the truth. It's time we dispel the myth that the medieval period was a time of cultural and intellectual darkness. While it's true that the collapse of the Roman Empire did lead to a certain level of chaos and decline in the 5th century, it was far from a period of total darkness. In fact, it was a time of profound transformation, a metamorphosis that would shape the world we live in today. One of the most significant advancements during this period was the creation of universities. The concept of a centralized institution for higher learning was not only innovative, but revolutionary. These hubs of knowledge were the birthplaces of many intellectual advancements that we take for granted today. Moreover, the medieval period also saw a remarkable growth in literature. From Beowulf, one of the earliest works of English literature, to the poignant and moving works of Dante and Chaucer, this period was rich with stories that continue to resonate with readers today. The proliferation of literature during this time speaks volumes about the intellectual curiosity and cultural richness of the era. Furthermore, the medieval period was a time of significant architectural advancements. The creation of castles, cathedrals, and other grand structures required not only artistic vision, but also a deep understanding of structural engineering, mathematics, and physics. So it's clear that the medieval period was not a time of darkness, but rather a time of enlightenment, a time of exploration, and a time of growth. It was a period of illumination, where the seeds of modern civilization were sown, where the foundations of our world were laid. So, despite its reputation, the medieval period was far from dark. It was, in fact, a beacon of light that continues to illuminate our understanding of the world today. Did you know that some of the world's oldest institutions of higher education were born in the medieval period? In the heart of the Middle Ages, around the 11th and 12th centuries, a remarkable transformation took place: the birth of universities. Now, these weren't quite like the campuses we're familiar with today. These early universities were more like guilds or associations where scholars gathered to share and explore knowledge. Take the University of Bologna, for example. Established in 1088 in Italy, it's often considered the oldest university in the world. Students from all over Europe flocked to Bologna to study law, seeking to understand the complexities of Roman and canon law. They lived, learned, and debated in rented rooms or churches anywhere they could find space. Now let's journey north to the University of Paris. Founded in the 12th century, it was a beacon for theology. Theologians, philosophers, and scholars convened here, turning Paris into a hub of intellectual activity. The University of Paris was unique in its structure, organized into faculties, each dedicated to a specific field of study: arts, canon law, theology, and medicine. This structure laid the groundwork for the modern university system we're familiar with today. At both Bologna and Paris, the curriculum was rigorous, centered around the 7 liberal arts: grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. These subjects formed the basis of all learning, considered the tools to unlock every other field of study. So, who were these early students? They were young men, typically from wealthy families, seeking to expand their knowledge and improve their social status through education. It was a privilege to study at these institutions, a privilege that paved the way for future generations. And so these medieval universities, born out of a thirst for knowledge, became the cornerstone of intellectual development, shaping the course of education for centuries to come. They were the places where minds met, ideas were exchanged, and the foundations of modern academia were laid. Thus, the medieval period was a time of intellectual growth and knowledge expansion. Ever wondered where the concept of sports tournaments originated? Well, buckle up, because we're about to take a journey back in time to the medieval period, where the spectacle of tournaments was a highlight of social life. Tournaments began as a form of military training among knights in the 11th century. Picture this: knights on horseback, clad in armor, charging at each other with lances. It was intense, it was dangerous, and it was, in essence, a simulated battlefield. But as time went on, these tournaments evolved into something much grander, much more spectacular. By the 12th century, tournaments had become major social events. They were no longer just military exercises, but a display of chivalry and a test of courage. They drew participants and spectators from all walks of life, Nobles, knights, ladies, and commoners all gathered to witness these grand spectacles. Now let's talk about the rules. Each tournament was presided over by a lord who would set the rules. Typical events included jousting, melee combat, and archery. And yes, these were as exciting and dangerous as they sound. Knights would compete against each other, either in teams or individually, and the aim was to knock the opponent off his horse or to break as many lances as possible. And what was a tournament without prizes? Victorious knights were often rewarded with rich prizes, ranging from fine horses and weapons to lands and titles. But perhaps the most coveted prize was the recognition and fame that came with victory. Winning a tournament was a surefire way to gain prestige and influence. But tournaments were more than just adrenaline-fueled contests. They were a mirror, reflecting the values and aspirations of medieval society. Courage, honor, skill, and chivalry were all on display. And they were not just about the knights. Tournaments were social occasions, opportunities for courtly love and political intrigue. Tournaments were more than just games, they were a reflection of the medieval society's values and aspirations. So the next time you watch a sports tournament, remember its medieval roots and imagine the spectacle it once was. Castles are often synonymous with the medieval period, but do you know why they were built? The grandeur and magnificence of castles can often mask their true purpose. They were not just extravagant displays of wealth and power, but a physical embodiment of strategic military planning. Castles were typically built at vantage points, atop hills, near river crossings, or overlooking key trade routes. This allowed the inhabitants to keep an eye on potential threats and control important locations. The design of a castle was heavily influenced by the need for defense. High walls and imposing towers were not just for show. They served as formidable barriers against invaders. Drawbridges, portcullises, and moats were common features, each designed to slow down or halt an enemy's advance. And let's not forget about the murder holes and arrow slits, grim reminders of the castle's primary function as a fortress. But castles were not just military installations, they were also the homes of nobility and their households, bustling with life and activity. Inside the fortified walls, you would find residential quarters, kitchens, chapels, and even gardens. These castles were self-contained communities, capable of supporting their inhabitants for extended periods during sieges. The castle was a symbol of authority and a center of power in the medieval period. The lord of the castle held jurisdiction over the surrounding lands, and the castle served as the administrative hub. It was here that justice was meted out, taxes were collected, and local issues were resolved. Castles also played a significant role in social events of the time. They were the venue for feasts, tournaments, and other celebrations. These events were not just for entertainment, they helped to strengthen alliances, display wealth, and assert the lord's status and power. In essence, the castle was a microcosm of medieval society, reflecting its hierarchy, culture, and the constant threat of conflict. They were not just majestic structures, but crucial components of medieval warfare and society. The medieval period was a time when the church wielded significant power, but how did it come to be so influential? Well, let's dive into the intriguing history. During the Middle Ages, the church was the single most potent force in everyday life. The faith was the heartbeat of the era, with churches, monasteries, and cathedrals dotting the landscape, serving not only as places of worship, but also as centers for community gatherings, learning, and social services. The church's power didn't stop there. It extended far beyond the spiritual realm, into the realms of politics and education. The Pope, often considered the most powerful man in Europe, had the ability to excommunicate kings, essentially cutting them off from the church and their people. This power was immense, as the church was seen as the gateway to heaven, and being excommunicated was akin to being denied entry. The church also played a significant role in education. Monasteries often served as schools, teaching not only religious doctrines but also subjects like Latin, philosophy, and mathematics. This education system laid the groundwork for the birth of universities later in the Middle Ages. Furthermore, the church was a major landowner, controlling vast tracts of land across Europe. It was able to tax the people living on these lands, further bolstering its wealth and power. However, it's important to note that the church's power was not always used for the good. The Inquisition, Crusades, and various religious wars were all orchestrated by the church, leading to countless deaths and widespread destruction. Despite these darker aspects, the church's influence during the medieval period is undeniable. It shaped the social, political, and cultural landscape of the time, impacting every facet of life. The church was not just a religious institution, but a powerful entity that shaped the course of the medieval period.